out the week. It's great stuff.
This is how you should start a week.
I know. Mondays are lame.
They are lame, but now we have a Monday with a show. We've got a football game coming up. Week 9 of the SFL is about to get kicked off on a Monday. We had Friday, Saturday, and Sunday with no games. It was a little bit sad. Some other league was playing, but this is the only.
I think I can use a break from the beatings we've been getting. So,
touche. So hey, let's recap what happened in Week 8 of the SFL. We'll get into Week 9. We're gonna have a special show on this Monday night before the only game of Week 9. We're gonna have kind of a mid-season review, and we're gonna talk about some contenders and pretenders, and maybe make some people mad in the process.
Yes.
You should not be that excited about it. All right, let's look at the previous week. So probably the biggest surprise, well, we had a full slate of games last week, starting with 3 on Friday. The biggest surprise out of those Friday games, Los Angeles put an absolute pounding on Indianapolis, 38-21. That one was a big shock to me. We both picked Indianapolis in our pick, and
let down.
we both
Huge
lost.
letdown.
So, and after we talked a little harshly about Charleston, perhaps, on our show. All right, it was me.
You got a frog in your pocket?
About the 4-2 Charleston Predators, at the 2-4 Albuquerque Adams. Albuquerque did indeed come away with the win, and Charleston added a loss to that column. So Saturday featured 2 shutouts, both of which were done by the away team. I mean, how often does that happen?
It's an amazing thing. I don't know how it happens or why it happens.
DC beat Pittsburgh 21-0, and then Ramos finally did what I've been asking him to do and prevented the opponent from scoring any points. I told him, if you can prevent our opponent from scoring at all, I can almost guarantee you that we'll win. Finally, he listened to Mexico City Aztecs. Won over Chicago 20-0. Both those teams on the road. It's kind of crazy. Fort Worth looks like they returned to form. They beat Houston on the road. Pretty much the biggest surprise of the weekend, though, I think Carolina takes down Florida 35-20.
It was quite the surprise by a lot of people. Nobody thought it. But look, I think Carolina beat also Florida a few seasons ago during that championship run late in the season.
Yeah, Carolina just seems to have Florida's number. Does Canton have Florida's number? That's what we're going to talk about later on in the show. So a couple of announcements that happened over the past few days. The salary cap for season 24 was officially announced. It'll be a $42 million salary cap for each team. So it'll be interesting to see how people can shuffle things around and get themselves under the cap for next season. Some incentive changes for season 23 were announced. So the incentive for having multiple sacks, interceptions, or forced fumbles went from $350,000 down to $100,000. Just simply because so many people were hitting it.
Oh, yeah, and the league was running out of money.
They were running out of cash.
Cam's like, I can't keep that jet fuel for Mike and Gerald if I keep going this rate.
And that's important. The game-winning score incentives actually went up to $1 million from $250,000 because it just happened so infrequently. I think it's happened 5 times this season. So that incentive went up quite a bit. There's a new incentive for a go-ahead score in the final 5 minutes of a game. If you get that go-ahead score in the final 5 minutes, $250,000 coming your way. There's some new $100,000 incentives for offensive players because most of the incentives so far have been to defense and special teams, ironically. So there's a new $100,000 incentive for quarterbacks that have 2 touchdowns or more. All of these will be or more. 2 touchdowns or more and no interceptions in the game. Quarterbacks with 2+ touchdown passes and 1 rushing touchdown or more in a game. Halfbacks that have 125 or more yards. Wide receivers or tight ends that have 100 yards or more. And then halfbacks, fullbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends that have at least 2 touchdowns in a game. So opportunities for offensive players to start to get some of that incentive money. And then a special shout out to Jason Miller, who publishes the Friday 5. It's an article that's been done in the past, and it finally came back for the first time here in season 23. And I posted that on August 30th on the SFL website. Why am I giving him a shout out? Because he talked about my Aztecs and he mentioned this show.
Great.
And he said I look good on this show, and I was like,
well, what about me? I look like
no. He didn't say anything about you. Nothing. But he said I look good.
Maybe.
And he said my team looks good. I don't care about you or your team.
And maybe he's going to be a part of my pretenders. We're going to see. I don't know.
All right. Well, let's talk about Week 9. Let's get into the upcoming week. It's only the one game. We've got Florida at Canton with Cameron Irvine, Charles Doherty coming up just about 25 minutes time, depending on how long we talk for the rest of this show. that's the time limit, but it's more of a guideline than an actual rule. So, all right, let's get into our midseason review, shall we? There's some really great teams so far this season. There's some teams that just really haven't gotten anything going. And then we've got those teams all jammed up in the middle. Let's talk about the teams that are good. Arizona, still unbeaten. They are 7-0 coming into this week. We've got Florida, Canton, Minnesota, Baltimore. They're all doing well. Again, I mean, those were all teams that were at the top of their divisions. Not necessarily division winners, but they were all great teams last season.
Usual suspects from last season, which had to be, close to the top 4 seeds in Florida, Canton, Minnesota, and Baltimore. Arizona's in there. Like you said, still undefeated. So it's almost the usual suspects.
Yeah. Yep. Here's some unusual suspects, at least in the 4K23 era. We've got Mexico City and Nashville. Obviously, Nashville being new this season, but Mexico City in the 4K23 era, we haven't been so good.
It's until you decided to throw your hat in the ring.
Yeah, I was like, all right, let me have that playbook.
Man,
let's do some things.
I was a solid coach at one time. You showed up, I'm like, I might have to get back in it. I'm tired of seeing you be successful and beat me, even though it was one time. Beat me handily. So I gotta start grinding.
Mexico City and Nashville both at 5-2 at this point in the season. Surprises to many people, I think. So on the flip side of that, there's some teams whose seasons are likely already over. Queen City at 0-7, and we've got Chicago and Pittsburgh both at 1-6. And before you yell at me for saying that your season's already over, it's almost impossible at this point to get to even 6-6, and even if you do, it's almost impossible to make the playoffs at 6-6.
Yeah, it's in my opinion, it's a 7-5 type of season you need at minimum, and you might not even get in at 7-5.
So there's a few other teams that likely might not make it as well. We've got Los Angeles at 2-5. There's Denver at 2-5 and Motor City at 2-5. One more loss, and they'll have that 6th loss as well, and it could be all over for them. So tall hill to climb for those teams if they're going to make it in. But then we've got a whole bunch of teams that are either middle of the road, or they're currently doing well, but you wonder, is that sustainable? I mean, somebody even say that about Mexico City. Like, yeah, they're 5-2, but are they going to keep winning? Who knows? Are these teams actually contenders, or are they pretenders? So what we did is we chose 6 teams that we felt were on the fence one way or the other, and we did it draft style. That was Gerald's idea because he just loves torturing me amongst everybody else as well. So we're going to do it draft style. We're gonna pick teams who we think are pretenders, who we think are contenders, and then we'll break that down. Gerald chose first, and he, as the recently elected villain of the league, based on our convention announcement show, there was a poll. You were chosen the villain. I see you dressing in black tonight.
I got my villain attire on.
Embracing it, I guess. You're going to do all
my shoes are black. They can't see me even my shoes are black.
Yeah, but you're going to do all the pretenders. It's just to pile it on and make people mad. I'll do all the contenders.
I'm up for the task.
All right, so I'll go first.
Good cop, bad cop.
And good cop, bad cop. I'll introduce my first selection as a contender, and then you can start making people mad.
I'm down. I'm ready.
Sounds good. All right. So my first choice for teams that I think are contenders this season, I'm going to go with the Fort Worth Toros. And that means a lot coming from me because this is one of my biggest rivals in the league. They've had my number for a long time. Finally, I beat them this season, which really made me happy.
Handily, too.
Handily. Yeah. Take that, Marcus Dunhill. But listen, when you earned it, you've earned it. Fort Worth, they're at 4-3 right now, and after finally snapping a 3-game losing streak this past week against Houston, but I want to take a deeper look at those games. First off, their strength of schedule is number 2 in the league. Okay, their strength of victory, that's number 2 as well, and their strength of defeat's number 4. All of those being in the top 3 or the top 5, they've had a tough schedule so far. Yeah. They've gone against really quality opponents, but yet they still have a winning record. Yes, they lost 3 in a row, but it was to 3-4 Albuquerque. That's a losing record, but still, sometimes anyway, a solid team, especially at home, which is where they lost to them. They lost to 5-2 Mexico City. And 7-0 Arizona. So all quality opponents that they lost to. There's no shame in losing to those teams. Right. Those are good teams. They've beaten 4-4 Lexington, 4-3 Carolina, 4-4 Atlanta, and 3-4 Houston. Those are teams that are not bad teams themselves, and they beat them. So they're number 2 in the South. They're only a game behind the Aztecs. Obviously, Mexico City has the tiebreaker over them with that win, but there's a whole second half of the season to go. They still have the ability to overtake that number 1 spot. They could remain in number 2 and still get a wild card spot as well. So Fort Worth just needs to keep refining their offense. Their defense is among the best in the league. Top 6 in points allowed. Their offense, they're no slouch either. 147 points scored over 7 games. That's still in the top half of the league. And then looking ahead at their remaining schedule, 2 of their remaining 5 opponents have losing records. One of their remaining opponents is 500 right now. 2 do have a winning record, but Fort Worth, they can compete with the best of them. So Fort Worth, you are a contender. They're going to finish with a winning record. We're going to see them in the playoffs.
And I can't disagree with that at all, because Fort Worth has a pedigree right over the last few seasons. Got there, we're strong. Sometimes they have a little bit lull in season, right? But they play stiff opponents, just like you mentioned. So
yeah.
I agree with them being a contender.
All right, well, who's your first choice at Pretender? Who are we making mad first?
All right, so this is a team that everybody knows, who's watched the show knows that I have beat up on quite a bit, and they've actually come to the surface and actually rose to the challenge and actually did good. So it is the Carolina Skyhawks. Now, it might be surprising to some to see them as a pretender on this stuff, seeing the recent success that they've had.
They're 4-3.
Right, but you just have to hear me out.
Okay.
Right, so yes, they have won 3 of their last 4 games, but it hasn't been impressive. It hasn't impressed me enough to consider them a contender, in my opinion, right? So, look, they have only 1 quality win, which a win to consider being a quality win has to be against an opponent with a winning record.
Right.
That was against Florida last week. But this is going to be a comment that might upset some people. Even the sun shines on a dog's rear end some days, and last week it did for Carolina. They have only beaten 1 team with the winning record at this point in the season. Their strength of defeat ranks 20th. In the league, right? Out of 25 teams. So,
so they're losing
in,
the bad teams.
they're in the bottom 5th, right? Which is obviously near the bottom. We know that. Before anyone turns their nose up at that number, let's also dive right in and do a little bit of a comparison. Okay. My team, the Louisiana Revolution, who is having, I'm gonna say, a rough season.
Yeah.
But it's kind of terrible. We're not playing to what we have. We have a strength of defeat ranked 6th in the league. Yeah. We have played teams that are better, and we just can't be. We're not losing against, slouch teams in the league. So just to compare the two, yes, we're 2-4, they're 4-3, but guess what? We've played a lot stiffer opponents than what they have. Their offense has scored less points than their defense has given up, along with their offense being ranked 23rd in the league. That same offense turns the ball over 5th most times in the league, right? So if you turn the ball over that much, there's no recipe for success on offense. That doesn't seem like an offense that says any kind of a contender to me.
Right.
Their remaining schedule isn't easy either. 4 of their remaining 5 games against teams who are 500 and better. Now, is this team, going to use what I have said today,
they have in the past,
to turn themselves into a motivator and get them into it, because they're a favorite team of mine to bash. And you know what? Look, I think they're pretenders. I love you, Harish. Don't hate me. I can give you a hug. We can have some drinks at the next convention.
Now, I know you said that you agreed with my Fort Worth take. I ain't even touching this. I'm just going to move right on. Listen, if they just want to hate just you and then they still like me, that's cool. So we'll just
I'm all for it.
All right, good.
They ain't call me the motivator in Carolina. I'm good with it.
Yeah, you have motivated them in the past. We'll see. Maybe it'll motivate them this time around. All right, my second choice for contender, the DC Dragons. DC, they had people scratching their heads at the beginning of the season. First, they lose to a rookie franchise in Nashville in the season opener. Then they head into week 2. They lose to Florida. Granted, it is Florida. Now they're 0-2 at that point, right? Then they beat Queen City in week 3. And sorry, Queen City, but who hasn't? I mean, they haven't won a game. They're 0-7. And then they only they won that one only to then lose to Canton in week 4. 1-3 after 4 weeks. And that's happened to them a grand total of Never in the past 3 years. 6 seasons, they haven't started 1-3. You know, it's just not something that happens to DC. But let's look at that again. Okay, they lost to 5-2 Nashville. They lost to now 6-1 Florida. They lost to 5-1 Canton. These are great teams, you know, that they're losing to. You know, and what have they done since then? They won 3 straight to get to 4-3. They took down a great team in Minnesota at 5-2. They beat 3-3 Bossier City. They shut out Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh's house,
right,
21-0. I mean, that's a pretty good stretch of 3 games. They've got a top 10 strength of schedule. Their strength of defeat is number 2 in the league, second strongest opponents that they've gone up against. You know, it means that they've lost, but they've lost to the league's best. It could happen to any team, any day. Just ask Florida.
Right?
Anybody can lose to
true.
anything. You know what I mean? You know, see, Carolina, you did a thing. Yeah, he's the mean one. Anyway, so DC, they're third in the North Division right now at 4-3, but they're only a game behind 5-2 Baltimore and 5-1 Canton. Okay, they can pass both of those teams in the standings. There's plenty of games left to do that. They've just got to get their offense going a little bit more fired up, and you know, they're in the middle of the road scoring points right now with that offense. They need to do more going forward, but I think that they can. Their upcoming record is pretty tough. They've got 4-4 Lexington on the road, then they host 2-5 Denver, but then they visit 7-0 Arizona in Arizona. And then they play host to 5-2 Baltimore. I think that's a key game for them because as a
100%.
division opponent,
Yep.
you know, both of those teams could have the same record at that point. That might be something that either decides to the division or at least decides the number 2 spot. And then they finish on the road against my other contender pick so far, Fort Worth. But they've got the tools to get it done. They've got a potent running game led by Kevin Say and fullback Chuck Steller. Couple that with Sam Harrison, who at the halfback position, and even quarterback Shabazz Synergy adding to the rushing total. It's a team that can compete against any team, any week. DC Dragons, you are a contender.
Look, and this is a team, I agree with you on this one as well. They are a team that actually is built to withstand a beating against tough opponents, and they proved that so far.
Well, that's what they've had so far.
Yeah, and that's
opponent.
what I think so far, what they're going to do, and we're going to see what they're really made of going forward, and I do think they can compete with those top-tier teams.
We'll see if they do it. All right, pick number 2 for Pretender.
For me,
Who are we making mad now?
My next Pretender is going to be the Lexington Miners, right? They sit at 4-4. The Lexington Miners are Pretenders for every stereotypical reason that you would want to even say it. Look, but hey, they have been losers of 2 of their last 3 games. Their strength on anything is not very good. And let's be frank with one another. Yeah. It's downright terrible, in my opinion. So let's go over the ranks of their strength. Strength of schedule, 25th.
Which is
to
last.
This point in the season, they have the worst strength of schedule, which would lead you to believe if they were a contender, they would probably sit somewhere more like 6-2 instead of their current state as them sitting at 4-4. Their strength of victory, 21st in the league. The combined record of the teams they have beaten is 7-21. Enough said. They're not beating anybody.
Right.
Strength of defeat, second to last at 24th. This, in my less than expert opinion,
average expert,
right? So says the most of how good your team really is. If you lost against teams with a great record, you would not be ranked second to last in this category
DC,
at all.
DC with the number 2 strength of defeat.
Right, and guess what they're doing? They're losing against mediocre teams. Right. So let's compare them to the worst team in the SFL right now.
Again, sorry, Queen City.
What we know, right? Queen City, right? The Queen City Corsairs. They rank number 2 in strength of schedule and 11th in the league in strength of defeat. Obviously, Queen City can't rank in strength of victory because they haven't won anything against anyone.
A key aspect of having a strength of victory is having a victory.
It's actually winning. But you got to think, they're the worst team in the league, and they actually statistically have played a tougher schedule and actually have gotten beaten by a lot better opponents, you know, across the board. So what I think is worth mentioning as well, with the Lexington Miners, they give up just as many points as they score, and they face 2 teams that have 5 wins through 8 weeks in the last half of season 23. I would be surprised if this team reaches the playoffs at all. Pretender.
Pretender for Lexington. All right. I'll
Damn.
get into my final choice.
You're not
I ain't
even
even
going to touch
touching
it.
that. No, go Aztecs. That's all I got. All right. So my final choice for contender. All right. This is my last pick. This team finished season 21 at 3-9. They followed that up by finishing 6-6 in season 22. How could a team with those records be considered a contender here in season 23? Because the Mexico City Aztecs are back. That's how you do it. Listen, I almost didn't pick Mexico City because I feel like a narcissist right now picking Mexico City. But it seemed a little self-serving. But listen, I'm just a co-owner and a coach. There are 26 players on that team that do their part at progressing their player and being there in the locker room, being there on game day, and help contribute to the success of this team. And they deserve to hear their praises sung just as much as any other squad, especially after 2 really difficult seasons. Mexico City is 5-2. They've been absolutely red hot this season. In the games that they win, they do it by multiple scores every time. In fact, it's been by 20 or more points in every win, except for one, which was only by 14. Sorry, it was against your team. So
At least.
2 scores. When we've lost, which by the way has only been to undefeated Arizona by 4 and to 5-1 Canton by 3. Okay, we're not even losing by a touchdown here. We're only losing by a few points, which is really aggravating, But still, quality losses, I guess. Number 1, strength of defeat. You talk about the strength of defeat being a good litmus test. Number 1, strength of defeat in the league. I can live with that. I'd rather be 7-0, but I can live with 5-2, knowing that we played tough people, tough teams, and we were close. We were really close. This team knows how to score points, and they know how to limit their opponents to scoring. The point differential is a positive 101. The next closest team in the league, plus 78. Like, the next closest team ain't even close. Number 3 in points scored, number 2 in points allowed, by just a single point difference with Florida, who's number 1 in points allowed. So I'm coming for you, Florida. Their shutout against Chicago brought them to 21 straight games. 21 straight games dating back to week 13 of season 21, where Mexico City has either won the game or they only lost by 1 score. They haven't been blown out in 21 straight games. This team has been competitive in literally all of them that they've played since that time for nearly 2 full straight seasons now. Coming up next for them, they've got 2-5 Los Angeles. They've got 0-7 Queen City. Those are the next 2 teams on the docket. And I'm not knocking those teams. I'm just saying, as far as opponents go, the sun is shining on Mexico right now, okay? After that pair of games, there's a pair of division games hosting 3-4 Houston and 3-3 Bossier City, both of which are in Estadio Matt Willson, all right? They finish up on the road against 5-2 Nashville. It's their only remaining opponent with a winning record. The Mexico City Aztecs are back, baby. We're a contender.
I couldn't agree more. You guys have become a team that has been scary good, progressively better since you took over offensive coordinator duties with this team, and we've seen a progression over the course, like the last half of season 21, season 22. Seemed like, hey, he's getting in control and learning his players and their tendencies and how to work. And guess where you're at now? Now you're into this season. Yeah. You're 5-2 as I think one of these scary good teams in the league, and I do think you're in prime position with that favorable schedule to win the South.
And again, even last season at 6-6, all 6 of those losses, 1 score. 1 score losses. Amazing. They could have gone either way. All right, your final pick for Pretender. Who's the last team you're going to tick off tonight?
This pick, may seem like it was hard to make to some people, but it was not.
We're going down in a ball of flames here.
So the Nashville Temple actually made it quite easy for them to be for prime picking right here. Okay. Look,
5-2.
As a pretender sitting at 5-2. Now we're going to go over their games so far, as we know, which factors in to their strength of schedule.
Yep.
They started out the season by beating the DC Dragons in week 1. We all know week 1's a crapshoot, and everyone knows nothing at that point. So nothing impressive to me at all there. But guess what? A win is a win.
They did win.
In week 3, right, they ended up having themselves a game they played against L.A. And guess what? They beat a very bad L.A. team.
Yeah.
And guess what? They got themselves at 2-0. And look, maybe you would start to think, hey, maybe they have a little bit of something working for them, right? Then they turn around and then they have a bye week And then guess what happens? Here they are, week 4. They go in and they lose a field goal fest against a struggling Indy team who is bipolar as it gets in the SFL in Indy because they don't know what they want to be from one week to the next.
That's true.
Week 5 comes their first true test, and what do? They lose big, losing by 20 to the defending champs in Florida.
Yep.
Then through weeks 6 through 8, they win 3 straight. Think, hey, man, they won 3 straight.
Here they go. Yeah.
Guess what? They faced Motor City first. The Motor
V8s.
City V8s, who seemingly have traded their V8 for a 2-stroke engine off of a weed whacker. Then the very next week, they beat the already pretenders in Carolina.
Yeah.
And then they turn their 3rd win in a row against the Denver Nightwings, who have 2 wins, who remind me of a person who dumpster dives looking for treasure but comes up empty, and they only beat the Denver Nightwings by 3 points.
How many teams are we making mad in one recap?
Now, look, let's go over their 5 remaining games here.
I apologize on behalf of the Matt Wilson Show.
They play 4 teams in their remaining 5 games that are 500 or better. Tough schedule that they have remaining, and I just don't see them handling that gauntlet very well. Now, this is a huge prediction for me.
Okay.
The only team that does not have a winning record that plays Nashville or my Louisiana Revolutions. Right? So guess what? We are going to prove in Week 13, when they visit the swamps of Louisiana, that they are exactly the pretenders I say they are when they come into the swamp, and we're going to shut them down and prove to them, I don't care if we win another game the rest of the season, this one we will win, and we're going to prove that they are the pretenders that they are. I would be very surprised if this team, with the games they have remaining and the opponents they have, if they reach 7 wins, because I don't think it's happening. I think they're 6-6 at best and miss the playoffs.
I feel nauseous. So, great recap. I ain't touching it with a 10-foot pole. All right. That is our Contenders and Pretenders segment of our Season 23 midseason review. Let's get into Week 9, shall we?
You were stressed.
Oh, boy, I'm sweating. And I even turned the AC on up in here. All right, let's get into Week 9. We got a game coming up. It's just a couple minutes out. Speaking of contenders, right? 2 of the top teams in the league. They face off tonight's rematch of the Season 22 championship game. These 2 teams put on a show that ended with a 20-17 Florida win. They had actually met only a month earlier. Canton won that one 24-10 over Florida. So these teams, they are really, really good. They're going to be really competitive. There's going to be points scored. It's going to be a great one. Arizona, they might be the last undefeated team at 7-0, but arguably Florida and Canton are still the top 2 premier teams in this league. Florida may have been stunned, I should say, by Carolina last week, but otherwise this season has been solid. Every game has been a 2+ score victory. They got 2 shutouts on the book. They're number 1 in points allowed. Like I said, we're coming for you, Florida, on that particular category. They got top 10 at putting points up on the board. Canton, of course, they're no slouch either. They've had some much closer games, though. They've beat D.C. and Mexico City by only 3 points each. Mexico City held them to just 10 points, which hasn't been done since September of 2023. That was Season 21, by the way. But they, too, are top 10 in scoring points, number 3 in points allowed. So 2 Titans face off tonight. We'll do a standard game breakdown now. Let's start with Florida and their offense.
All right, Florida had a hiccup in their loss last week to Carolina. You know what I mean? But it was more of like a speed bump on their way to another playoff berth, in my opinion. Florida has the top 4 offense that turns the ball over, second fewest in the SFL. Quarterback Ron Cochran is the most accurate passer in the league at 68% and leads the league in completions, along with having the number 2 QBR. If anybody knows anything about QBR, it shows how efficient you are with the ball and what you do.
Yep.
He has thrown touchdown passes to 5 different pass catchers as well, which he's distributing the ball to lots of people on his offense. The run game is good as well. They average over 100 yards per game on the ground. They are very efficient, and they are one of the most complete offenses in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hit every note. I mean, that's Florida's offense in a nutshell. Let's talk about their defense. In my opinion, they are among the best in the league, maybe second best.
Yes, and this.
Sorry.
I
Sorry. Go
think
ahead.
they're
Florida's
up
defense
there too,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So look, they boast the league's 3rd best total defense, the best run defense, along with the league's best scoring defense.
Right.
They take the ball away at an extremely high rate as well, which has them with the best turnover differential. Because as we said, they just don't turn the ball over. Their offense just doesn't turn the ball over, but they're really good at taking away.
Yep.
Arguably the best secondary in the SFL. They pressure the quarterback very well as well. They are third in the league as a team in sacks, and they have the ability to shut down the best aspect of any opposing offense that they face, and they've shown it. Yes, they had the hiccup against Carolina, but I think we've already established what Carolina is.
Yep.
So, and here we are. I think they have a complete package to make another championship run.
All right, well, let's talk about Canton and their offense. Extremely talented team. They did lose in week 1 to Baltimore, and everybody was, at least I was wondering, are they coming back down to earth? Well, let's take a look at the next 5 games. Granted, they only won 2 of those games by 3 points. Am I laying it on too thick?
No.
Go Aztecs!
No.
Anyway, but still, they've won 5 games. They're 5-1. Talk about that offense.
Yeah, look, and they've been on cruise control since that week 1 loss, in my opinion, right? They have the number 1 rushing attack in the SFL, even though I have my pick that somebody else has the best running backs in the league. But guess what? Statistically, here they are. They have 2 very, very good running backs on this squad. They are averaging 175 rush yards per game combined with Logan Lee and Robert Johnson.
Yeah.
Look, and I challenged quarterback Scar Patterson early on this season by saying he hasn't proved his ability to able to win games if the run game slows down. He has been very efficient and has the second best completion percentage, just under Ron Cochran, and is top 5 in QBR, right under Ron Cochran as well.
Yep.
So he's really efficient. Even though he ranks, at the bottom in pass yards as a quarterback, I don't think that matters. He's being really efficient with the way he's distributing the ball, and he's actually completing them and being really, really efficient. He has risen to the challenge, and I do believe he might be able to carry the offense in the event that the run game gets slowed down.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, especially after seeing it firsthand, the Aztecs did a pretty good job of slowing down the rushing attack, and he led basically a game-winning drive. So, I got no argument there. And also, him being, near the bottom or in the bottom of passing yards is really, I think, less a knock on him and more a testament to the running game because that's what's getting them the wins. You don't need him to throw. Don't throw.
He's doing his part.
Yeah.
100%.
So let's talk about the defense. They're not as dominant as they were last season, but they're extremely still good.
Yeah, and they're good. They're a top 10 in total defense and are also a defense that takes the ball away a lot, just like Florida defense does as well. They rank 6th in takeaway. They apply a lot of pressure on the quarterback, which is led by, in my opinion, the midseason defense player of the year or season, whatever you want to call it, and linebacker Kevin Brackett, who is 5th in the league in sacks, along with having 2 interceptions and 2 forced fumbles for this defense. And they are extremely opportunistic. They get in every single pass lane possible, knock balls down, tip them up, and everything else. And they are still a very good defense, not quite as dynamic and shut down defense as last season, but they are sit at the record they are right now because they still are extremely good, and they're looking to make another championship run themselves.
All right, well, that game is just about ready to kick off. I know Cam and Charles are waiting for us to stop yapping so that they can get themselves on the air, and then they can yap for a little while. But first, one last thing, we'll make our pick for this game. Our picks so far on the season, you are kicking my butt. I'm at 11-10, barely over 500. It's terrible. You're at 15-6. Last week you picked Fort Worth and Indy. I picked Houston and Indy. Obviously, Fort Worth and L.A. got the wins.
L.A. ruined it for me.
We both picked them.
Ruined it for you too.
It is what it is. So, all right. So this week's pick, we only got the one game. Florida at Canton. Who do you got?
I think Florida still has what it takes to actually go in it, even on the road, going into Canton, right, and actually taking the Canton Classics down for the second straight time in this championship rematch. Florida wins it.
All right. Well, I'm going to take Canton, mainly because I need to make up some ground on your picks, and I'm either going to make up ground or I'm going to lose even more, but I'm not picking the same team. No, honestly, Canton, I think Canton's going to get the win. First off, they're at home. Very tough. It's just like Baltimore, very tough to beat them at home. It's tough to beat them at all, right? And not only that, but they played twice last season, right? Once in the regular season, once in the championship game. In the regular season, Canton had Florida's number. Florida listen, Max Paul, Mighty RX, he can figure stuff out. He saw what went wrong, and he fixed it. He's not going to be able to do that same technique that he did in the championship game this season. I think that Canton is going to be able to take it to Florida once again. Canton gets the win at home. That's my pick.
That's why you're 11-10 and I'm 15-6.
Oh, wow. All right, that's all the time that we have for the Week 9 Matt Willson weekly kickoff show. We hope you liked our midseason review. I hope you liked our contender picks. I hope you don't all send out a hitman to take out Gerald. I apologize on behalf of the entire league for everything that he said. But it was mostly true. Let's be real. All right, that's all the time that we got. Florida at Canton coming up next. Who's going to win that game? As Matt Willson would say, there's only one way to find out, and that's on the field. Cameron Irvine, Charles Doherty, take it away. The floor is yours.